Big tragedy, a huge tragedy.
And are we talking about Sandy Hook?
We're talking about it in Newton. Yeah,
Yeah, Newton.
A huge tragedy where someone came into a school, shot a bunch of people.
Yeah, actually, what I want to tell the viewers on this is extremely critical because what happened in Aurora, Denver, outside of Denver, and in Newton, Connecticut, are events that both Mark and I will tell you firsthand that are very much tragedies. You can't have children shot. You can't have this type of violence. But the reaction to this is not where the blame should be placed. Because Lanza, the shooter at Newton, actually had severe mental problems, and his mother still allowed him access to weapons. So we don't look at the weapon necessarily, but we have to look at a broader picture of things like mental health. Why did he have access? And then why did he have access to guns like a Bushmaster? I mean, so this is huge. There's a huge world here. But just like Rahm Emanuel has said, you never let a good disaster go by without capitalizing on it. So what's the Democratic Party want to do now?
Well, there's a little backstory to this that was kind of interesting. There was a newspaper in New Jersey who published the addresses on their website of everyone who owned guns in their area, and kind of I guess try to shame him into giving their guns back.
Right.
But what was interesting?
Wait a minute, you're talking about legal gun owners.
Legal gun owners.
You're talking about registered legal gun owners were publicized effectively internationally by this newspaper.
Yeah, and they were put on a website so you could have, there's a little pin there. You could see where their house was. And, you can Google anything. So you could see what their yard was and what their kids are like and everything. So you basically said, okay, let's target all these gun owners and try to shame them into
giving up their guns.
Giving up their guns. Or maybe if there's people who need a gun, who are criminals, that's the place. That's where they go get them.
But doesn't that open the door for all the people that didn't have a gun? Burglars might go there and try to burglar homes.
But the whole theory there, because these people were anti-gun, the whole theory backfired on them. Because what happens, and all the people who didn't have guns, who were the neighbors, said, "Well, geez, they're going to come to my house and burgle my house." So they all went out and bought guns. So basically, what happens, more people went out and bought guns. As a matter of fact, the newspaper itself, because people were upset about them, going and publicizing where their wives and kids and families were, and making them a target. They made some complaints, so the newspaper had to hire armed guards. So basically, all the way around, everyone kind of is against guns, but when they get trouble,
they want to hire a gun.
They always want to have a gun. So,
okay, well,
but there's one thing about this controversy is that nobody is really very moderate about this. I mean, people are very for guns or they're anti-guns. There's not really a lot of middle ground.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. That is what the basis that the argument for the National Rifle Association and the Democrats have uniquely argued the Second Amendment. First of all, the Second Amendment is a constitutional right to bear arms. Now, it's not a constitutional right that is limited to if you're part of the National Guard or part of a militia. No, the Second Amendment says each individual in the United States has a right to bear arms. And it's not to bear arms against people invading the country. It is made to fight the tyranny of government. And all the dicta that's been written by all the people that went into creating the Constitution says the very right of the individual to bear a weapon is a right of a citizen of the United States. So what are they trying to do to people that own guns now, Mark?
Well, I think they want to take them away.
What do you mean take them away?
But I mean, I think
out?
What Thomas Jefferson said about this, he said, was kind of a couple of interesting quotes. He said, those who hammer their guns into plowshares will plow for those who do not.
That do not hammer their guns into
And then he also said that the strongest reason for people to retain the right to keep and bear arms as a last resort to protect against tyranny in the government. So there's a couple ways of, if you go to the Jefferson Memorial, you look what's in there in his memorial and what's written there. You're saying, well, you don't want to confuse this. The right to bear arms has not necessarily. I mean, it's true that you want to be able to defend yourself. It's true that you want to go hunting. But what the Second Amendment is about is that if people have guns, right, it's less likely the government will be a tyrannical government.
That's correct.
I mean, that is what the Second Amendment is about. Now, when you talk about militias and you go, well, you're not in a militia, so you shouldn't have a gun. But that's not what...
That's only the first part of that sentence.
But that's not what the forefathers said. If you if you look back on some of the, George Mason, when they're back in the Constitutional Congress and they're arguing about it, say, I asked her, what is the militia? It is the whole people, except for a few public officials. So what they're saying, the militia is anybody,
everybody.
Anybody who's not a government official
is
the
militia.
Is the militia. So, and if you even go back further in time, you go back to Machiavelli. I'm sure you read Machiavelli the Prince. He said, "You're bound to meet misfortune if you aren't armed, because, among other reasons, people despise you." And so, in Sam Adams said, the Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people in the United States who are peaceful citizens from keeping their own arms. So, of course, it's a tragedy when you have some kind of shooting like this. And, these things do occur. Now, there's counter arguments. If you're just going to talk about whether it's good for people to have guns as far as public safety. Now, there's arguments for people saying that, wait a minute, there was 2 million crimes defeated, 2 to 2.5 million crimes defeated last year or per year
because of the person
people had
owning
guns.
a weapon.
Okay, and also when they're talking about banning assault weapons, well, criminals in general use a 38 or a 9mm pistol. They don't really use assault weapons. I guess they're kind of hard to hide under their coat.
Well, you can't really walk down the street carrying an AK-47.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different arguments about gun and gun ownership, but when you're talking about the Second Amendment, it really comes down to it's a political issue where you're saying if the citizens can bear arms, it's less likely the government will try to be tyrannical.
Let's talk about who. This is what I mentioned a moment ago. What the Democratic Party has tried to do right now. Let's not forget who's president. President Obama has stated that no one should really even own a handgun. Attorney General Holder has stated that nobody should be owning a handgun. Nancy Pelosi says the Second Amendment says you have to be part of a militia to own a handgun. And Dianne Feinstein entered a bill into the Senate, starting with banning all highest assault weapons, high-capacity magazines. So there's been all this. And then Governor Cuomo and from New York has decided that he wants to confiscate all handguns and all weapons because his state should be safe. What he's saying is the safe should be safe if you're somebody with a gun, but the rest of you, we'll protect you.
Well, I mean, the moderate position, and I think it was by a movie star. I'm not sure who it was, but he got pulled over on the freeway and he had a illegal weapon, pistol under the seat, and it was very famous. So the press was saying, well, do you think everyone should have a gun? And he said, no, just me. So, I mean, the moderate position is like, not everyone should have a gun. I should just have one. So, of course, everyone wants to have a gun, and they want no one else to have one.
Okay, well, I think what we ought to do.
And if you're in the government had guns. They don't want people.
They all have guns. But I think what we ought to do is wait, because this is the ongoing issue.